Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. I am freshly back from my second deployment in Kerr, Texas for the flash floods. And I am back, you guys, and I am ready to move to the next phase of our civil rights case. I will give you guys a full update on both of those things. Some of you may know that I've been fighting the Central Appraisal District, and Mitch has been leading a fight on repealing property taxes. Can't wait to keep you guys up to date on all that stuff. But today's video is going to be on what Mitch Vexler's biggest concern is with the economy. I mean, essentially what's going to lead to an economic collapse. And we're going to do this a little bit different, guys. Normally, when Mitch and I work together, we present information. We have a plan, we have certain segments, but today is just going to be a podcast, a free-flowing conversation. And if you guys can, let us know whether or not you like this format below. We'll certainly listen to you. Now, Mitch Vexler, can we start by talking about what is your biggest concern right now with the economy? And also, how are you?
Fine. I was watching the market today, and NASDAQ is up 467. Gold is up, silver's up, bonds down, interest rates up a tad. So kind of deja vu from last week, but market in terms of the indexes is very strong. So the answer to your question of what are the major concerns, knowing what we've discovered through this process, in reality, the biggest concern is the American dream. The American dream of home ownership has been decimated, and nobody is talking about it, A, either out of ignorance, or B, out of intent to defraud. So the press talks about, well, there's a shortage of housing. Okay, we've already proven the press are part of the problem. That's saying it kindly. The shortage of housing is a direct ramification of the cost of how much a person or a family can bear for that cost of housing. And coincidentally, I was in a conversation this morning with a gentleman who was in real estate for 30 years before he exited recently because of this problem. Mom and pop can only pay what they can pay in the form of median household income. And if that median household income turns into 8, 9, 10, 12% in terms of real estate price as compared to the cost or their income level, their median household income, 8, 9, 10, 12% of that median household income goes to real estate tax. There is your problem. It's that simple. Mom and pop can't pay what they don't have over and above because people have to put food on the table.
Yeah.
And then a week ago, we did the document on over 4 million families being fed here in Texas because they don't have the money. So,
Mitch, if I can, I want to go back a little bit and I want you to articulate this. I don't know, we have several new viewers because I really think this is important. When you say the biggest concern, economic concern you have is the American dream, and you said the American dream of home ownership. Now, you're certainly talking about some of the reasons why the dream has been capitalized, but can you articulate, can we stop, can you break, can we articulate what happened? How did the American dream turn into the American nightmare?
The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So at some point, somebody said, okay, we have this problem, we have to raise taxes and we have to do X, X, and X. The problem was, there is a theory based on what I've seen that this whole thing has been a scam since day one. And the reason you can say that is because the Federal Reserve is the world's largest purveyor of fraud, bar none. They do not exist to help mom and pop, they exist to help the banks. The second largest purveyor of fraud in reality are the central appraisal districts, which are owned by the school districts. So assuming that this was a fraud, a setup from day one, let's just run with that for a second. The net result is that mom and pop have been equity stripped in order for those people who participated in the fraud to put the money into their pocket. There's two levels of participation, one of which would be political, the other one would be financial, i.e. the banks. The school districts to this day continue to build new schools. Now, there are some that are closing down, quite a few in Fort Worth, et cetera, quite a few in the Colony, Texas. But that fact that they're closing down, they didn't say in their bond raise documents, well, we're going to be closing schools. So they close them down, but the debts still exist. And the debts are on the back of mom and pop. And here in Texas, give or take, that outstanding fraudulent school district bond debt is $660 billion today. So to your point, Travis, let's just go with the fact that this whole thing is a scam. The schools are bankrupt and they're taking mom and pop with them by virtue of the equity stripping. The equity stripping has taken place already. What people don't get is that that outstanding fraudulent school district bond debt, every time they go to raise bonds today, tomorrow, the next day, that money is not going to pay off the bonds. It is going to pay off the interest on the outstanding cumulative bonds. And that is a Ponzi scheme.
Yes, just like a mortgage is almost, I mean, a mortgage is the same way. They're amortized and front loaded with interest. Now, you said a few things that I want to clarify, and I want to make sure that the viewers understand. You mentioned equity stripping, that they're being equity stripped from property taxes, homeowners are. And what he's saying is for example, you guys say my house is worth $300,000, my property taxes legit are 3.52%, which means, well, first of all, they overassess my value above the market. So I'm actually losing a minimum of 3.52% of my equity because I have to pay that each and every year, which is against the 16th Amendment to the Constitution that specifically says that we are only supposed to be taxed on our income. My primary residence is not income, it's my shelter. So they shouldn't be taxing. Now, I want to go back and we'll get to Ohio, the property tax problems there, the fact that maybe they need to let schools go bankrupt because they're at the point of no return. We'll get to that. But I want to go back to something you said. You said the Federal Reserve is the largest purveyor of fraud, second being the Central Appraisal District. But let's go and talk about the largest purveyor, then we'll talk about the second largest. Can you tell the viewers, Mitch, why you are saying the federal, and understand that most people think that Jerome Powell is a nice guy. Most people think that a large majority, maybe 85, 90% of people think that the Federal Reserve is still their friend. So can you please articulate exactly what you mean when you say the Federal Reserve is the largest purveyor of fraud?
Where is it written that nice guys can't be criminals, i.e. Bernie Madoff? What's the difference between a Bernie Madoff and Jerome Powell? Both were involved in a Ponzi scheme. There is no difference. They're both nice guys. Look at all the people that lined up to give Bernie Madoff money. But we have a document out there talking about the Federal Reserve and how many times they have stepped to the plate. Every single one of their actions, without exception, has never been for the benefit of society. It has been for the benefit of the banks. Now they'll couch it and say, well, but we didn't want the economy to collapse, so we printed all this money. Well, and part of that equity stripping is inflation. So how do we get to the inflation? Every time a central appraisal district bumps a number and says, well, this new house over here is going to cost $400 a square foot, so this 15-year-old house over here must be worth $400 a square foot. Now, there's no truth in that statement, but that is the fraud that is being committed on mom and pop. And it ends up in equity stripping, taking their money out of their value of their home and out of their pocket to pay for the crimes committed by the school districts. Remember, the school districts own the central appraisal districts, and it's the central appraisal districts that are committing fraud by overvaluation and overtaxation. So going back with regard to the Federal Reserve, you must realize that how does this Fed do what it's doing? Well, it is a purveyor of fraud. The banks get into trouble and they have reverse repo to try and rescue the banks. But even the reverse repo, it's kind of interesting. I wrote a memo to Bill Pulte, who's now the chairman of FHFA, which controls Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. I did that about 10 days ago. The bonds that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae put out are basically backed by the real estate. What is the real estate? Well, we can prove irrefutably that the real estate is overvalued by at least 40 cents. That means whatever nonsense they're promoting in the public by virtue of the fraud through the taxing entities is 40 cents on the dollar overvalued. Well,
Yeah.
who's paying for that? Mom and pop. They get hit in their pensions. They get hit at Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. All the values are up, right? So it's the CADs that promote the fraud, but the tentacles of the CADs, part of the fraud, it shows up in your insurance. It shows up in your principal and interest tax deduction with what you end up with at Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. It's everywhere. The fraud spins throughout everything that mom and pop touch in their daily life. And we even did the one article showing that there's 8 pieces of real estate tax in your morning cappuccino.
You know,
So every time they create a fraud, that's what causes the inflation in the market. The Federal Reserve's done it, and the central appraisal districts have done it.
you know, Mitch, you said something that I think it's really important to talk more about. Now, certainly the Central Appraisal District, we can also say the Central Appraisal District is a tentacle of the Federal Reserve, as well as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac being a tentacle of the Federal Reserve, which is really the Federal Reserve is a tentacle for the bankers, maybe the families as well. We won't go into there. But you did say something I thought was very important. Are you saying that from your math, from your expertise, that the housing market right now, on average, is nominally, not real, not inflation adjusted, but nominally 40% overvalued? Is that what you're saying?
Minimum.
Minimum 40% overvalued?
Minimum.
Okay.
Right. So we just came through the front door. Now let's go through the back door. The back door to get to the same spot is the median household income, right? You have to say, okay, median household income, let's just say it's 85,000 for the sake of this conversation. It's 85,000 minus heat, utilities, real estate tax, food, clothing, car, all those things have to come out. Well, why do we have people, a lot of people, with $20,000 upside down on their credit cards? It's because the median household income doesn't exist. Therefore, what is the real value? And you're right back to that godly Texas situation where the median value of a house on the market, 160 grand. The outstanding fraudulent school district bond debt, 120,000
Per house?
per house.
So that's $40,000 when you minus the two. So their houses are worth $40,000.
Negative. You got it. Negative.
Now, you and I talk a lot about median household income. Many viewers understand why we're using median household income as a huge factor on why things are so overvalued and going to crash and deflate. But can you articulate, Mitch, why is median household income so important to a healthy, sustained economy?
Let's look at it this way. Let's come through the back door and then we'll go to the front door. So this time we're going to invert it. Okay. So the back door is you've got 5.1 trillion of outstanding school district and bond fraud right now today across the United States. It cannot, under any circumstance, be paid off. The school districts are bankrupt and they are taking mom and pop with them. So when you understand that, we have the compound cumulative interest calculator. That document was attached to the bill that I delivered to Helen Kerwin about 3 weeks ago. That one document, 5 pages worth of numbers, but that is the irrefutable proof that there isn't a single politician on this planet that can disprove it. And the question for that one document is, okay, Mr. Politician, okay, Mr. Chief Appraiser, okay, school district superintendent who's committing accounting fraud. Here's the compound interest calculator using Godly, Texas. In Godly, Texas, it's $120,000 per house, outstanding school district fraudulent bond debt. Here's a pen and a piece of paper. Show me exactly how you're going to pay it off.
Well, you can't pay it off.
You can't.
No. And is that why median household income is so important? Because in order to sustain the prices and pay off the debt fraud bubble we're in, it requires income to pay that off. Is that correct, Mitch?
Yes, but to your point before, you used the key word being the tentacles. So talk about the 5.1 trillion outstanding school district fraudulent bond debt as compared to the 167 trillion of U.S. national debt plus unfunded liabilities. So you would say, okay, fine, it's 3.5%, no big deal. It's all okay, and we'll figure out how to get around it. Yeah, no, you won't. and you can't. Now, there is a solution to this, but the reason why you won't and you can't right now, effective today, now it's not saying tomorrow, but let's just talk about today. That 5.1 trillion in 30 years goes up 4x. That's climbing. It's not going down because all the money that's being raised by the bonds today is not going to reduce the principal. It's going to pay the interest. Not 10 cents of what's being raised now is going to any child. That's a fallacy. It simply isn't true.
Okay.
And they can say, well, you know, we're raising new bonds because we're building new schools. You don't need to be building new schools. You don't need to be building new stadiums.
I mean, certainly most people, when they see this, are going to understand, like, you probably shouldn't build a $500 million stadium in a rural city like they're doing. So most people are going to know that, right? But what makes because listen, Mitch, the teacher's going to say, what about the children on the roads, this and that? They're voted on. If the voters didn't want these to pass, they wouldn't. And we're going to Ohio because Ohio is shutting them down. And we'll talk about what they need to do in a minute. But what makes exactly, and just pinpoint this, Mitch, what makes what the school district is doing, what makes that fraud?
What voter on this planet said, I agree to go bankrupt to support my school district? Not one. And that means you paint the target straight on the school district superintendents who are in fact committing accounting fraud.
Let's stay in the second largest purveyor, okay? Federal Reserve backstops banks at the cost of our income, at the cost of our ownership, at the cost of our civil rights. So they're not just bailing out the banks, they're bailing out the banks and taking things from us forever. And not to mention apathy is also covering that up. But Mitch, we talked about the school district fraud. No one signed up to go bankrupt. And I don't think people are really understanding what they're doing when they're voting for these bonds, because essentially what they're doing is they're bankrupting themselves because their property taxes go skyrocketing. And the biggest thing is that money doesn't go towards the children, doesn't go towards the roads, doesn't go towards the teachers. And I would say, for me personally, that's the biggest thing I want people to understand. If people are really truly caring about these things, schools, roads, children, then they would look under the hood and they would see that there's a gauntlet of fraud between me and whatever they think that my taxes are going towards. Gauntlet of fraud. So Mitch, let's move to Ohio. There's been a lot of momentum in Ohio. You and I have researched the laws with Ohio, and unfortunately, Ohio doesn't have a bond cap like Texas does. Texas has a 25% bond cap law that they're clearly violating. I think we've sent in 35 criminal complaints for different jurisdictions now. So for us, it's easy because the math is the math. We can show the violation of 25% cap, although the people in charge are absolute tyrants because they're not doing anything about it. They're just turning their backs while we're getting robbed. Now, Ohio, when we talked, and I said, they don't have that cap. What's the solution there? There's a lot of people, first of all, that are voting down the bonds. That's great. But can you explain to the viewers, that the only solution might be to repealing property taxes in Ohio, allowing the schools to go bankrupt? Can you talk about why allowing schools to go bankrupt may be the solution and why it might also be the best thing for children and teachers?
So the Federal Reserve exists to backstop the banks. That is its sole mandate. The central appraisal districts exist as the purveyor of fraud that is owned by the school districts. The Fed exists for the banks. The central appraisal districts exist because they are partially owned by the school districts. The interest on what the school districts do, where does that money go? It goes to the banks. There's your nexus. So the people that are in charge that you just mentioned, they're useful idiots. They are the co-conspirators in a criminal conspiracy to defraud. What makes them a useful idiot? They're so dumb, they don't even understand that they are acting on behalf of the banks. They're acting on behalf of the nexus. Who gets the money?
Okay. So
and then with regard to the Ohio thing, well, be it Ohio, be it Texas, the school districts are bankrupt. That's an irrefutable fact. We've yet to see one that truly isn't. And by the way, we just had one 60 days ago called Can Utillo here in Texas that went under. What happened in Ohio is even more perverse than Texas, because Texas has a 25% cap on the prior year's outstanding bond value at a school. Now, yes, Ken Paxton has managed to ignore that for the time being, but we've already raised that issue. But in Ohio, they don't have a cap. So basically, every school district in Ohio can do whatever they want if they can get away with it.
Crazy.
So in truth, Ohio is in worse shape than Texas.
Yes.
Hard to believe, but that's true. And the only solution to Ohio is that the mom and pop homeowners and the businesses need to join forces and say, we've had enough of this crap, and literally put those school districts into involuntary bankruptcy. It's not an option. You just do it. You push them into federal court, you get it away from the state. And that's frankly what we're working on here as well. We have to get it outside of the state of Texas because the useful idiots are so stupid, they don't even know who they're working for.
Let's talk about useful idiots. For the viewers, I also want you to know that after that, we'll talk about pensions that are entangled in all of this mess. But Mitch, I mean, think about this. I mean, how do you convince the public, officials, useful idiots? How do you convince a teacher that her own school or his own school needs to go bankrupt? How do you convince those people that that's the best path and the best solution?
Okay, so here's something that's crazy. Under the hood, we have found hidden investment pools. So the sellers of those hidden investment pools, be it the private equity firms, what have you, they go back to the Teachers Association and say, well, you've got this hidden investment pool. How about we sell you the bonds that you created? How about we turn around and sell you back the fraud that you created? So the school teachers have no idea what they've invested in. They don't know who sold it. They don't know what the value of it is, of the bonds, yet they've got it. So the school teachers themselves are in truth getting screwed over, along with mom and pop or any 401k holder that's invested in this garbage. This is sub-junk bonds. This is E level. This isn't even D level. This is all sub-junk. Now, what's the real value? As far as we can tell, in order to pay it off, somewhere around 13 cents on the dollar, maybe 13 to 30. But if past that, it cannot be paid off. The money doesn't exist. They've destroyed the system. The system is so broken, it needs to be shut down. There's only one way out of this, and that's per the bill that I drafted for Helen Kerwin.
Mitch, we'll talk about the bill, but I want to stay on pensions. You said 13 cents on the dollar as far as ISD bond debt. Is it true to say that most or many school teacher pensions, they don't have the knowledge that their retirement accounts are being invested in these E-level, as you say, bonds? Can you talk on that? Can you talk on, how would someone, whether they're a teacher or not, find out whether or not their 401k is being invested in toxic debt? How does one educate themselves on that?
You stand up in front of your school district superintendent and say, answer the following questions. And if you don't, I'm calling the FBI and I'll have you arrested by tomorrow morning, because that's where you are. You're past the point of being kind to these school district superintendents. These are criminals. Make no mistake about it. And what makes them a criminal? Well, they've committed accounting fraud. When you look at their balance sheets, there are no notes to the balance sheets, no sources and uses. And with regard specifically to these hidden investment pools, who paid in? What was their tenure? How long have they been there? What's the benefit of paying into it? Where's it all disclosed? Who sold it? I can go on like this for hours with these questions. The point of the matter is, even the school district superintendent himself can't answer the questions. And therein lies the problem.
And it is a problem, Mitch, and that doesn't educate anyone. Because if the superintendent is partially responsible for committing fraud and making sure that their funds are reallocated into toxic assets, then the the superintendent's an absolute waste. So how does someone find this out? How does someone educate themselves so that they can be proactive with their retirement? I mean, maybe they liquidate it, they reinvest in something else, but how does someone really know what is in their retirement? What is in their pension? How do I do that? Do I call them? I mean, it's confusing, right? I mean, there's like 80 pages to someone's 401k. How does someone get to the bottom of this on a personalized level?
It's not to say that somewhere across the United States you can't find this information. So far, we haven't been able to find it. And even Jeff Mashburn himself used the Freedom of Information Act. They can't answer the questions. Over and above that, even Jeff has been pounding the table on this. How much does it cost to raise a child through grade 5, grade 7, grade 9? What's the cost to educate them? They can't or refuse to answer it. The most basic question they refuse to answer. So it's something, and that's why I'm saying the school teachers themselves, never mind your union. Your union isn't helping you. Your union is sucking money out of your pocket. You're going to have to stand up en masse, go to a meeting with the school board and say, that's it. You got exactly 10 minutes, school superintendent, answer the question, or we're going to file criminal complaints with the FBI in Washington. We're going to get this out of our state because we haven't been able to get the answers either. We've been pounding, can't get it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Well, they'll just go away. You know, we're not going away, and criminal complaints have already been filed.
All right. We hopefully by now have explained to the viewers at least how some of this situation is systemic. Some of the situation that has absolutely decimated the American dream is literally happening right in front of your face. And most people don't even know. And so because they propaganda, teachers, roads, students, I care enough about them to look under the hood and say, wait a minute, red flag, right? There's a red flag on the play. We need more people here to see that there is a red flag so that we come up with a solution for the education, for the teachers, because what's happening now is not working. But I want to go back again, Mitch, to the number one purveyor of fraud, the Federal Reserve. Now, you mentioned several numbers here. I think for Texas, just Texas alone, $660 billion in ISD fraud. Total for the U.S., $5.1 trillion in fraudulent bond debt. That's I mean we have $37 trillion in national debt. So it goes to show that 15% of the national debt is equal to this bond debt fraud. I mean, you can't even, the number's so big. Look at debt to GDP. Debt to GDP, historic highs. So if you can't comprehend, I can't comprehend trillion, look at the debt to GDP. But the Federal Reserve, can you explain to the viewers how the Federal Reserve essentially put us into a situation to where we have an impossible mountain of debt to pay off? And then can you also explain, if that's true, if the Federal Reserve is largely, number one, responsible for this overwhelming debt, then why do they have assets? Why do they have over $6 billion in assets? I mean, 6 trillion, over 6 trillion in assets. Shouldn't us as American citizens be able to get that money to pay the debt off? I mean, it's our assets. So what's the deal there, Mitch?
Okay. So you and I had a conversation a long time ago about the Federal Reserve. And I said, if you take a 3-year-old child and you hand that 3-year-old child a quarter, yes, you sit on that floor with that child and say, heads, interest rates go up, tails, interest rates go down. Flip the coin. Okay. If a 3-year-old child can do this with a quarter, then why in the world do we have 23,000 employees at the Federal Reserve? When in truth, you do not need the Federal Reserve. They are a proven purveyor of fraud. Every time they go to print, so it's the U.S. Treasury that prints, but it's at the command of the Federal Reserve, left hand, right hand. Every time they print, they in fact create inflation. So they use it and say, well, we need this money to do X. Well, yeah, no, you don't. And you don't overspend. And these things, like I said, you can knock this 5.1 trillion and make this go away very quickly. You just simply say, we're going to vacate the debts and we're going to close the school districts. We're going to force them into bankruptcy. We're going to repeal the real estate tax, et cetera. But the point of the matter is this can be dealt with. The problem is they don't want it to be dealt with because the criminals that have conspired to take mom and pop's money through equity stripping, that's how they make their living.
Conflict of interest.
They make their living in violation of the state's constitutions and the U.S. constitutions. The net result will be if the government goes to print again, there's a very good probability you end up in the Weimar Republic because the U.S. government loses all credibility.
Yes. I think it's when they print again, not if, it's when. And that brings me to this, okay, the manipulation in the treasury market. And that has a lot to do with residential mortgage rates. And so by now, the people that are watching should understand that when the Fed cuts interest rates, those are like the one-day overnight interest rate. Residential mortgages follow the longer end of that yield, the 10-year treasury. So, Mitch, can you explain whether or not you believe, not if, but will the Federal Reserve in September cut interest rates? And then can you also explain how they're essentially doing quantitative easing right now? They are manipulating the treasury market by printing or purchasing long end yields. So if the Federal Reserve chooses to, they could either sell or purchase 10-year treasury, meaning, and also mortgage-backed securities, meaning they could ultimately manipulate residential mortgage rates. And they can also do that by purchasing mortgage-backed securities from lenders that are writing mortgages. So can you go into whether or not you believe in September they're going to do a rate cut? Not if they should. We know they shouldn't. We know they shouldn't. I go on record, they shouldn't. But do you think they will? And then can you go into treasury market manipulation at the hands of the Federal Reserve?
The whole thing is manipulated to begin with. The existence of the Federal Reserve is a manipulation in favor of the banks. So if they were to lower interest rates, it's kabuki theater. It doesn't matter. It literally will not matter. And the reason why it won't matter, now it may affect some larger businesses, but it will not affect mom and pop, because the truth of the matter is the median household income is right now the governor. Nothing else is going to change. If they can't afford it, you could drop it 200 basis points. They're still not going to be able to afford the house because inflation is running rampant. And regardless of what anybody says, okay, inflation may have leveled off. You go ahead and print. You'll watch inflation double up. And when they say, well, inflation's only running at 2.7, I don't know what planet you're living on, but we're looking at close to 12, right? You go and look at your food in your grocery store, which, by the way, is not in the CPI, Consumer Price Index. So they take all these things out in order to, again, manipulate the public. When you look at hardcore numbers, you see what the problem is. When you look at the debt to income, which is supposed to be 28, and then it starts pushing 48, when the real number due to inflation needs to be 21, it's all for purposes of manipulating the public.
Okay. You know, it's absolutely, and it really doesn't matter. And if you look at the global financial crisis, asset prices went down. I'm talking about houses now. House prices went down at the same time as interest rates went down. So sometimes there is no correlation, except at the opposite correlation. But quantitative easing, I mean, it is so dysfunctional right now. But personally, I think in September they're going to cut rates. That was the question, whether or not you thought they would, right? I think they will. And I'm very suspicious, Mitch, you know, and this is, I don't think they should, but I think they will, because they just re-edited all the jobs numbers. And so now, you know, I find it suspicious, because now what it appears that has happened is they have forced Jerome Powell to cut rates in September. Do you agree with that or not? Do you think that they edited data intentionally to force his hand?
No, I think the person who was responsible has been fired, but it's not just that one person, right? You're shooting the messenger. You have to shoot the people that created the message, never mind the messenger. So yeah, they got a huge problem, but we've been pounding the table on this for months. We came out and said these numbers aren't real. They don't even tie. They don't add up. And then you can say, well, fine, there's lag. As a matter of fact, Travis has a document that I wrote. We haven't published it yet, but it'll be done in a couple of days. But that's what that article delves into, is the actual math behind the scenes where it doesn't tie. And if it doesn't tie, then for what purpose is it being done? What is the game of the manipulation? So will the Fed lower? If President Trump keeps pounding the table, maybe, but who cares? Because it isn't going to do anything. It does nothing for mom and pop. They could lower 50 basis points, ain't going to move the needle. They could lower 200, still isn't going to move the needle.
Speaking about math behind the scene, and speaking about mom and pop, big, beautiful bill. Let me get your take on that, man. I mean, let's be realistic. Let's be judgmental to our president, which we should. Do you think that the BBB, the big, beautiful bill, do you think the math behind the scenes on that is best for mom and pop?
I don't know what Besant knows. He comes across as being a fairly smart guy, but the truth of the matter is the bill spends 3.8 trillion at a slower pace than what has been happening. But you cannot deny that it is spending that money. You cannot deny the compound cumulative effect of the outstanding fraudulent school district bond debt, and in the case of the Federal Reserve, the outstanding fraud committed by the inflation of manipulating the population, interest rates up, interest rates down. Every time they print, that creates inflation, and inflation is a tax. Two sides of tax, exact same message between the Federal Reserve and the central appraisal districts. So, as I've said, they can drop the interest rate. It isn't going to help mom and pop, and that's the bottom line. If they truly want to fix this, the fix is the bill.
Yeah, but in the big, beautiful bill, it doesn't have those parameters, does it?
It doesn't even take it. It does not take into account the compound cumulative interest calculator, and that's the problem.
Well, let me ask you. You said you don't know what Besant knows. What could he possibly know that would justify the bill?
As far as I'm concerned, this is nothing more than kick the can down the road.
It's unfortunate.
I understand why they're doing, because President Trump has to look at this as a very pragmatic problem. My position is different. My position is the Federal Reserve is the problem. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Simple.
So I'm not here to play footsie with somebody that I know are acting in a criminal manner. President Trump has to look at it and say, well, I've got to keep the balancing act going long enough in order to be able to peel this apart and fix it. But in reality, how do you do it? Well, how you do it is you start with the real estate tax problem, because, like I said, it may only be 3.5% of the 167 trillion, but its tentacles are so large that you have no choice, because you do that as step one, then you go after the Federal Reserve. Fix mom and pop's balance sheet, give them back the land beneath their asset, make them secure, because they are the U.S. economy. They go down, so does the U.S. economy. Fix the real estate tax fraud first, and the school district bond fraud, then target two, Federal Reserve.
Mitch, I believe, and I've made this clear, every single politician is guilty. Everyone, until proven innocent. And I'm saying that based on logic and reality and historical precedent, that there's so many frauds that are in politics. So I haven't seen enough to say I have faith in our president. But I will say I want to. If I could talk to them, he could talk to me. If I could ask him questions, maybe I can get there. But can you, and this is your opportunity to clear some things up. There's a lot of misunderstandings sometimes in the comment sections. People are like, oh, Mitch just loves Trump. Mitch just loves Trump. He's always going to blah, 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 right? So can you explain to the viewers why you still have faith in President Trump and why you started out that way? Whereas maybe I was more, and again, I want to believe in every president, so don't get me wrong here, but I still think they're guilty, and that's where I'm at. Can you explain why you have a difference in opinion than me?
I am concerned that certain investigative bodies are told to stand down, and that makes me annoyed and very concerned, because the evidence is the evidence, the math is the math, and the law is the law, and we've got all three on our side, and the criminals literally have no whatsoever answer for the criminality. They're guilty, they're caught. So you have to understand that you can only go so far and steal people's money before people start to take matters into their own hands. And when we started this, I said, this is my main concern. And then all of a sudden, Travis, you get hit. Okay? If it wasn't you and it was a hothead there, that guy goes out to his truck, what do you think is going to happen? See, this is the problem. So I hope that the powers that be and President Trump, I do understand the pragmatic approach. I read every word in that bill. I'm probably one of the few knuckleheads that actually did it, but I've gone through every single word. I understand the pragmatic relationship. I understand what they're trying to do. However, I also know and can prove everything that we've got on our website. That evidence is hardcore. There is no way out. They're guilty. So when you understand that, okay, and you know that you might be able to fix somewhere between 5.1 and 7.1 trillion and restore the balance sheet to mom and pop simultaneously, then for what reason is it not happening? The website's got all the evidence, your website, Mashburn's, but everything we've got is available to the public. It's free. We're literally handing everything to the DOJ and the FBI on a silver platter.
Yes, literally.
They've done their job.
Yeah, they have it. They have all. You guys, for the viewers that are just kind of joining us, Mitch, predominantly Mitch, a little bit me, kind of took me a bit to get there. We've turned in really thorough, accurate criminal complaints to everyone, DOJ, DAs, FBI, SEC, the list goes on and on and on. But I want to move on, Mitch. We're running a little bit long here. Can you articulate, say there's someone that is just watching this channel, they just started watching it right this very second, you got 2 minutes of their attention. What do you want to tell mom and pop? In other words, what is the most important thing right now that mom and pop should know about this economy? Say they have no experience whatsoever, they're indoctrinated, they know nothing about economics, they just pay into their pension, they just live their lives, try to pay their bills, try to whatever, be positive or not. But what is the most important thing that they should know right now? They've never heard us before. What do they need to know?
37% of the households across the United States, and it's 37% plus, are going to go bankrupt and or lose the roof over their head. And that is a direct result of the real estate tax that is being forced upon them. But the rest of the world needs to understand, when you said 37%, okay, understand this. 42 million plus households in the United States. They go down, so does the US economy. And this economy, regardless of what the press says, is in trouble. There are solutions. But first, in terms of fixing it, mom and pop have to understand that, and we've articulated it. We tied uniform standards of professional appraisal practice to the Texas Property Tax Code, to the Texas Constitution, to the US Constitution, to the Texas Education Agency. It's the first time that we know of where it's actually been done. We've got it, it's articulated, it's drawn together. The facts are on our side, the math is on our side, the law is on our side, and they've got nothing. They've got fraud, and we can prove it. When mom and pop can articulate it, they can then stand toe-to-toe with a politician if they want and say, what are you going to do to fix it? And if you aren't, you're out. We'll vote you out of here. But you've got to go public, you've got to take it to the press.
Yes.
You have to start filing the criminal complaints. And frankly, if you're in the same kind of position we are, you begin to realize that the people at the state level are more useless because they refuse to do their job. They should also be replaced. But the point I'm getting at, it's got to go federal. It's got to go to the DOJ, the FBI, the SEC. You got to start pounding the table because that's where we are.
Well, because they also have, on top of the lack of law, the lack of math, they also have intimidation. They also understand the game. They know how to disrupt people. I'm talking about property taxes. They have a corrupt inner circle of thugs that are doing their bidding and literally on their payroll. So it's not good, Mitch. It's not good at all. I mean, I've got assault and battery, just in case you guys were wondering what he was saying before. I mean, they literally laid hands on me when I went to legally protest my property taxes. How could they do that? I pay over $12,000 a year to this organization. Over $12,000 a year. I don't live, the home that I live in, I'm renting, but I also own a home that's being rented out. And so I have to pay property taxes. I can barely afford to even keep that home. Mitch, let's move on to the final, probably the most important thing. And we always talk about this. There's too many people just whining and complaining, and there's not enough people talking about solution. Now, certainly being aware is part of the solution. But can you go into the final segment? It's not really a segment. I just wrote it on a piece of paper, right? We're not presenting. We're just having a conversation. What is, think about it. I mean, you've been working on this for 5-6 years. You know, I've been pushing as well for the last 11 months. I have my own opinions, but what is your opinion on what exactly pinpoint this, laser point accuracy, articulate this the best you can for mom and pop. What is the solution?
There's only one solution. If there was something else, I would have figured it out by now. But the bottom line is the real estate tax must be repealed in its entirety across the United States. No tax on any property whatsoever, in favor of the uniform states sales tax. Per the bill that I wrote, now it's not applicable in every state, but in the case of Texas, there would be a 15% tax for 3 years. It would drop once stabilized in year 3 to somewhere between 11 and 12. That's a perfectly acceptable number. There will be plenty of money for the municipalities and the school districts as far as their operations and maintenance are concerned. They just can't be stupid, and you're getting rid of all the fraudsters in the middle. CADs are gone, tax assessor collectors are gone, school district superintendents, frankly, you don't need them because all they ever do is look after the principals and commit accounting fraud anyway, so they're gone. You get rid of the fraudsters in the middle, but simultaneously, you also kill off 5.1 trillion of outstanding school district bond fraud, which cannot ever be paid off due to the compound cumulative interest. And we attached that compound cumulative interest calculator to the bill that we submitted to Helen Kerwin. So there was no mistakes as to where this math was coming from. We put it and we attached it to the bill because I know that nobody can ever answer this most basic question. How are you going to pay this off? This math is the math. You can't, you lied, the school districts are bankrupt, and that is what must be dealt with, and that is the solution.
Okay, but Mitch, specifically, how do we get that done? Like, say someone's just watching this. I mean, we got 10 months of work here, right? And I will have the websites, both of our websites and Jeff's website linked in the video description. If you guys want to go down the rabbit hole, trust me, there's no place better to go about what's happening in the economy and property taxes than to our websites, which are 100% free. There's absolutely zero paywalls whatsoever. So how does mom and pop get this done? I want to repeal property taxes. A whole bunch of other people want to repeal property taxes. It's not done yet. How do we get this done, Mitch?
Power. Numbers are power. So if you said, okay, fine, I've got 400 people in my subdivision that will sign up. You now have 400 people that you represent. Those 400 people, literally, you send a letter to the governor of your state and say, this is what we expect of you. If you don't, we're going to run somebody else. And we're going to build it on a local community basis because all real estate is local. We're going to keep building. We're going to go local, local, local. We'll reach out to every group that we have to. But this must take place because otherwise, as I said, 37% of the population, household population, is going to go bankrupt or lose the roof over their head. At which point, if that did happen, we've got much bigger problems because you're right back to the War of 1776 for the exact same reason. Nobody in the right mind would want to see this. This is solvable. And Governor Abbott himself is going, he said he's going to run again for the governor for the 4th term. Well, he's also talked multiple times about eliminating the real estate tax, and he's never done anything. Ken Paxton has violated the Texas Education Agency with regard to the 25%. Glenn Hagar has violated multiple laws with the property valuation study. He's got no capacity whatsoever to insist that a chief appraiser go and increase the values over and above what the appraisal district has come up with to satisfy some perverse requirement. Glenn Hagar also oversaw, he's not there anymore, they got a new person, but he oversaw the property valuation studies and the 313 agreements on the solar field.
Hence the circle of thugs. Hence the circle of thugs that allow this to continue. But there's
no way they do not know. And by the way, I just sent Governor Abbott an email 4 days ago. There's no way they don't know anything about this. We're telling them.
Actually, you also did today. You sent Ken Paxton and Abbott an email today. You copied me on. I thought, and Helen, actually a few other. It was a great email. Thank you for doing that. But real quick, a lot of people are wondering this. They're like, oh, if we do this, it's going to inversely hurt the poor. Just one question I have, okay, to respond to that. Will removing property taxes lower rent?
Not only will it lower rent, it'll lower your cost of food. It'll lower everything. It will cause deflation. So if you're a landlord, just as an example, and you've got the ability to drop rent to get your occupancy up, you would do that in a heartbeat because you can't replace the occupancy. Once that tenant is out, you got 60, 90, 120 days sitting empty. You cannot get that money back. You got an empty unit. You'll never get that money back. Your opportunity is gone. You betcha you drop the rents, grease lightning speed to get occupancy.
Yeah, you would. Outstanding, Mitch. Now, once again, you guys, take what we're saying seriously. Really think about what we're saying. Help us on this fight. Support the fighters if you feel like you don't have time. But overall, what I really want you guys to do is just start with education. Start with understanding what the problem is. Understand what Mitch said. Watch this video back a couple times, and then go down the rabbit hole, which is not really a rabbit hole. It's just where we should have never got to. It's really just supporting information that's saying law violations. We need to come together as a society. I think we had a great conversation, Mitch. I'm going to get us out of here now. Now, for the viewers, let us know if you like this format. Personally, I love it. I love just having a conversation, seeing where that conversation goes. We started this podcast out with just one question. What is your biggest concern in the economy, Mitch? And then from there, obviously, this is what we built for you. Again, hopefully you guys like it. We will listen to what you guys have to say because our goal is to educate you. So comment below. Let us know what you learned, didn't learn, what you liked, what you didn't like. And also, guys, know this. I love you. You're extremely important, and I appreciate you. Other than that, guys, if you're out there investing in your lives, in real estate, the stock market, the economy, whatever it is, you guys already know we wish you luck. Follow the website links, and we hope you win.